Hi, I'm Sally. I'm here to help you narrow down your trip ideas. This video is for people who have lots of ideas and need to choose just one. If you don't have lots of ideas, watch my video about brainstorming trip ideas. Either way, first, write them all down and take notes as we go. Okay, so there's 4 filters you're going to want to put all of your ideas through to select a winner. The first is timing, then safety, then deal breakers, then budget, because that's the hardest one. In reality, this is an iterative type of process. Once you start researching, you might realize that there's some other destinations that are nearby or that are similar that actually maybe sound better than the ones that you initially started with. But that's good, just take notes as we go. So, timing. This assumes there's a certain time of year that you have to or you want to travel, or maybe even certain dates. So Google is your friend in doing this research. Most places have a period of time where the weather is great, but there are crowds. This is multiplied if there are holidays, including school holidays. It might be harder to book. There will be lineups. Transportation could be tricky. If you hate crowds, cross those off the list. Most places also have a shoulder season, which is often the best time to go to avoid crowds while still enjoying fairly good weather. Most places do also have a time with bad weather or maybe hurricane season, something like that, just the wrong weather for the activities you want to do. I would suggest just cross those ideas off the list for now. You can go a different year. The exception would be if you are planning on spending all your time in an urban area, indoors. In that case, maybe you want to go during the off season, although I do recommend against visiting cities when there's going to be snow and ice, because walking around in the snow and ice is a hassle. So don't just focus on weather. Some places have bad insects or other things that could ruin the trip. So if you have very specific dates you plan to travel, check if there's a big event or a holiday that might cause closures or other disruptions. So don't assume it's going to be like at home. For instance, personally, I was really surprised by how hard it was to get around England over Christmas, for example. At home, that's not an issue. Also, the country you're visiting might completely shut down during a holiday season that you've never really heard of, or that isn't really a big deal at home. It might get really busy or expensive because everybody else is traveling, or that site you're really hoping to see might be actually closed. So if you're really focused on seeing one specific site, maybe a certain museum or historical site, make sure that it's not closed for restoration or something. If you're doing some activities like hiking or something, make sure that you check to make sure that the hiking season corresponds with when you will be there. It might not be when you expect. Also, if you're hoping to plan a trip that is going to happen in the next few months, you might need to check to make sure that there's actually still availability, because there's certain types of activities and trips and places that book out way, way ahead of time. Okay, the next basis for elimination is safety. So if you're traveling with friends, you're going to be pretty safe in most places, provided you educate yourself a little bit and don't be irresponsible. But if you're by yourself, especially if you're a new traveler and or a woman, you should definitely research this carefully. So new travelers have a certain doe-eyed look that make them a little bit extra vulnerable. So I would say stick with somewhere relatively safe when you first start traveling. Figuring out whether a place is safe enough for you is a little bit subjective and tricky. You could start with your country's foreign advisories and cross out any that seem like a really bad idea. And then next I would do some internet research. Make sure it's not too out of date. Don't worry about one-off anecdotal experiences. Look for patterns. Are you seeing multiple bloggers that mention a certain risk? Do they seem like experienced travelers? You want to have a healthy dose of realism here. You don't want to be one of those people who assumes that everybody in a foreign country is so warm and hospitable, nobody would possibly hurt me. But you also don't want to give in to fear-mongering or, believe that everybody else's anecdotal experience will happen to you. A lot of it's just about avoiding and mitigating risks. If you don't want to get hurt on a motorbike in Thailand, don't try to learn to ride a motorbike in Thailand. So the next filter is what I call deal breakers. This might include some kind of fundamental incompatibility with your diet, with your allergies. I'm hoping this might at least help you prioritize if you think about this stuff. Do some research, read some blogs and forums again. At this point, you might be getting a sense that there's maybe a lot of racism or discrimination of some kind that you just is going to ruin your trip, or it's just going to annoy the hell out of you. It's okay at this point to write off a place entirely because, you know, you're going to be catcalled and you hate being catcalled, or, you know, there's going to be too many touts, or it requires, you know, taking a lot of windy roads and you get car sick. Just eliminate those ideas for now. You can revisit them later down the road. Maybe things will have changed, but it's totally okay to eliminate a place if you're not going to have a good time when you're there because of those kinds of factors. So finally, we're on to estimating a budget. So there's 3 categories of expenses. We're going to get a rough estimate for each of those so that you can maybe eliminate a few destinations or prioritize among what you have left at this point. So we've got flights. You can use Google Flights. Get an idea of what a round trip costs for that date range. You can do some date comparisons here. I do have a separate video about how to book flights that gives you a few tips on how to save money. But for now, just get a rough estimate. Make sure that you're not looking at flights that you're realistically not going to take because they're too long, there's too many layovers, luggage isn't included, you have to transfer between airports. Make sure that you're actually looking at flights that you would realistically take to get a sense of how much those will cost, and write that down. The second is day-to-day costs. Using guidebooks is the best way to figure that out. And again, be realistic about the fact that once you get there, you might decide you do actually want to go out for a nice meal, or you do really want to see that site. Don't believe the bloggers who say, oh, I travel to New York for $10 a day. You know, it's just not realistic. Make sure that your estimate really reflects what you're probably going to spend. And then the third expense is pre-trip expenses. And this is something I often overlook myself. It's really important if budget is a factor for you in deciding a destination, because some of the destinations that are really cheap when you get there might actually cost a lot more than you think because of the things you need to spend money on before you even leave. So that can include visas, very important, vaccines, very important. Some of these are required, some of them you're just not going to want to leave home without. Maybe you need certain equipment, clothing, shoes, luggage. Make sure that you think about those when you're adding up an estimated budget, because that actually might eliminate some of your destinations right there. Now at this point, I'm hoping that you can add up all these estimates, come up with a rough idea of how much each of these trips is going to cost, and it might surprise you. Some of the more expensive destinations might turn out to be pretty reasonable in the bigger scheme of things. So prioritize, eliminate. Once you've gotten it down to one single idea, watch my next video about how to build an itinerary to turn that one idea into a really interesting and varied itinerary.